People see the suffering of the people in Gaza, the people in Ukraine. But if you put it in perspective, most of the world adheres to the charter. Most of the world don't break international law. Most countries work to find solutions, and the UN system provides that platform.
Is UN as an organization doing something about regulating AI to some extent, or addressing the potential threat of job loss?
I think there's a balance, and I think Secretary General's plans are to meet the balance without stifling progress in terms of AI, but at the same time creating some rail guards against disinformation, misuse of AI that will harm human beings and the environment.
Climate change, for example, that's also one of the things that is going to pose a bigger threat if we don't act now.
The damage has been done to an extent. What do we do with those vulnerable groups? And I think issues around adaptation, climate proofing of our development work will be the way to go. The richer the country is, the less the population, because people have less kids.
Which is counterintuitive as well, because naturally it feels like if you have more money, you may want to go for a larger family.
Because the richer you are, you send your children to private schools in those countries. Each of them is a speaking mortgage, constantly not giving up on your ambition and not listening to anybody that whatever you do is not doable. And I think that is the trick to success.
Perceptions, they're also at the core of it. It's just the stories that we tell ourselves and people around us. And I think it's not just Pakistan that has been skeptical in initiatives or organizations like UN, but I was also working. You're from Somalia, right?
I grew up in Kenya, but really.
So, but did you spend some time in Somalia, like in your childhood?
I don't know, 3 years.
3 years. So I was like working on a project which required us to develop some products for Somalia, and I found that there were many similarities, including people are skeptical about the foreign aid and development initiatives. So yeah, I think
people are suspicious, but we're in a world now with social media. Let's just say the truth is contested, and anybody can make things up. And by the institutions that have been attacked, it's not only us. We are not probably the number one target, but the entire governance system is attacked. The nation state has been attacked. International order has been attacked. But those institutions are not very agile to respond. They're not very agile, and to be frank, they're populated by people in their 70s or 60s who have no grasp of the world. I shouldn't say they have no grasp, but let's just say they're challenged in the world that we are today.
Yeah.
So the ability to be very agile to build a counter narrative or build your own narrative before somebody constructs it for you, it's not well understood. So we will see attacks on basic things that we all believe in, like we should have an international system whereby conflicts, disagreements are solved without shooting each other. You think that is agreeable to everybody. But then there's some guy online who will say, there is a world government.
Yeah.
They're trying to control us. You go, control you how? So it's that kind of, and many people who make the important policy have never been exposed outside their own countries or.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of challenges you deal with in a situation where, on one hand, it's good that everybody has an opinion and democratization of information, but that has also created an avalanche of disinformation that is very difficult. You just see the recent conflict between Pakistan and India.
Yeah.
The level of disinformation.
Absolutely.
The tsunami of disinformation. It's just, you just don't have time to respond to all of them. So they go through. It's like, it's
only going to get worse with the technological advancement. I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Yes. Yeah.
There's going to be a lot more challenges, and I would be interested to know that how UN could play a role in dealing some of these advancements that we are going to see. But just for the local audience here, you're working as the resident coordinator for the United Nations in Pakistan. How do you explain to people that what the organization is and how it operates?
Thank you. Let me start from the beginning. So 8 years, it's been nearly 8 years that the UN was formed. The UN Charter that is the governing foundation of the UN. It's called the United Nations Charter. Was signed 26 June 1946 in San Francisco. So it's 80 years
And that's also after World War II.
after World War II. Yeah, and the reason after the member states, especially those who have won the Second World War, the victors of the Second World War got together and said, you know what, we want to set up a system on how we live together as an international system, international community. How do we live together? How do we protect basic concepts of, for example, sovereignty?
Yeah.
So that the small countries have a system that if a big country invades you, the others will come to support the small country because you want to maintain concept of sovereignty. Or how do we trade with each other? People don't know the WTO is part of the UN. So by the way, it's part of the UN structures. Or how do we aviation is the UN. Or transportation of the rules of the sea. That's UN. Sometimes people don't see the totality of the UN. Just to point out those things. Even parking will be a satellite. When satellites go up there, you can't just send a satellite. Not every country can just send. You have to get a parking for a satellite. Who does that? ITC, that's the UN. Because otherwise the satellites would run into each other. So the international community got together and they said, we want to have this charter that will have three components that will help us live together in a more peacefully, but also create a prosperous world for everybody. Because we share this only one planet. We don't have other planets waiting out there, although some may add the other planets, but for now we just have this one. And the three areas were: one, peace and security. With the world that just come out of conflict, how do we create an institution that ensures peace and security? That was the Security Council. And by the way, congratulations to Pakistan. You've just taken the presidency yesterday of the Security Council. So Pakistan is the president now, and a key institution and very important institution. The second pillar of the UN Charter is socio-economic rights. There was a realization that people have socio-economic rights. Yes. And this is where the Sustainable Development Goals, before that MDG, they all come under the socio-economic rights, that we collectively share the burden to ensure that a child born anywhere on this earth has an opportunity to realize their full potential. And that means investing, bringing overseas development aid from rich countries to poor countries. And the work the UN does in Pakistan is within that socio-economic right division of the Charter. And then the final part is the human rights part, which is always controversial because member states, not all member states are very this is where people contest about the human rights. Where is human rights limited? Is it going too far? We as the bureaucrats follow what the member states have agreed to. So those are the three pillars of the UN Charter. Again, peace and security, socio-economic rights, and then the third part is the human rights. That's why it was set. But later on, member states within those three pillars added mandates to things to be done. And each mandate tends to produce an agency, a UN agency.
Right.
So one of the mandates, if you talk about the human rights debate, is refugee rights. Any of us could be refugee tomorrow. Any of us could be pushed out of their own country because of internal civil strife, or two countries going to war. How should refugees be treated? What kind of protection should we have? So that is, for example, the work of UNHCR.
Right.
Was set up to deal with that. So then you look at reproductive health. We talked about population before. Reproductive health. UNFPA was set up to help with the reproductive health. Women rights, although it's everybody's business, but UN Women was also set up, one of the youngest UN agencies. So the agencies were added up. That were UNDP and developed it. The WHO to create a global health system. You saw the COVID, Ebola outbreaks in West Africa. there is an institutional put in place to help those countries fight and respond, because we know that if one country's health system collapses and there's a pandemic or something out of that, it could affect everybody else. So this is the way the UN works.
And so when it comes to UN's funding, because a lot of development programs that are run worldwide, they require a lot of resources, you need a lot of experts. So what's the financial model of the organization?
So there's two parts of it. There's what's called assessed funds. So it's like a membership fund.
Right.
Pakistan pays it. And that assessed funds are focused on the core UN secretariat function. So you have a secretariat led by the Secretary General. He has his team. There are departments that run that, for example, provide services to the Security Council. There are departments that work on peacekeeping, another area that Pakistan is a huge player, sending peacekeepers through your army across the world to contribute to global peace and security. So there's a lot of parts of that machinery that is assessed. So everybody pays their membership, and then some pay more depending on the size of the economy. If I'm not mistaken, the US is the largest, pays 32%. I think China this year has moved to 20%.
Right.
So the US and China will be about 42% of the assessed funds. And then there's what they call a voluntary contribution. Voluntary contribution is to, for example, UNICEF, UNDP, all these agencies are voluntary. Nobody has to pay for that. So voluntary contribution is to say that I believe children's rights cannot just be in a document, in a convention. We need to go to Pakistan and help Pakistan and Pakistani government as it struggles with the issues of children out of school. So then UNICEF comes to Pakistan. That part is voluntary.
Right.
So it's paid by either individuals through their own fundraising that UNICEF does, or it's paid through rich countries who contribute to UNICEF. So most of the agencies, except the old, what I call specialized agencies that have their own assessed funding like ILO and WHO, most of the other agencies in the US system are what they call voluntarily funded.
Right.
And that makes the financing part quite unpredictable. So tomorrow a new government comes in that country that gives a lot of money to the UN. That government says, no, I don't want to spend that money there. And then the agency struggles to be able to do the work. So it becomes a bit unpredictable. And that's where we're going through now with the global financial uncertainties for the multilateral organizations.
Like you mentioned that US contributes to about 22% of the entire funding of UN.
The assessed funds,
Assessed funds. But for example, if USA decides to withdraw that contribution, so is there like any backup plan that is usually there to, fill the gap?
So assessed funds are very because it's membership funds. So it's very difficult to say, I'm not going to pay my membership.
I think US did withdraw its support to WHO, I guess.
Yeah, to WHO. Yeah, it did that WHO. And then you've seen another member state, China, came in and announced $500 million for WHO.
Right.
So, but for assessed funds, let me go back to the assessed fund, which is a secretariat of the UN system.
Right.
Member says some delay, it affects, this is what you see in the Secretary General's recent comments and our controllers, that the challenges of liquidity in the UN system is because member states take time to pay. They don't pay in January. They wait late to pay their share. But nobody has said, I'm not paying so far, because if you assessed funds, the cuts that the US government has announced is mainly voluntary cuts. They give resources to agencies, the UN agencies, or FAO, ILO, and others. And they said, it's not a priority for us. Now we want to review. They put a 90-day freeze, and they release some of the funds in some areas, and some just said this is not a priority for us. But that's all was voluntary in the first place, except as you mentioned, WHO. But on the assessed funds, the US government has not said they will not pay.
And so when it comes to the utilization of funds, there is this criticism that mostly people believe that UN spends a lot of money in terms of the events that are held. They're lavish, they're held in 5-star hotels. A lot of food is wasted in those events. how do you make sure that the funds that is collected has best utilization and it is spent on the people who deserve it the most?
So, I'll answer that question, but let me go to one of the major push that Secretary General has been asking the UN to operate globally. And the question is, are we efficient? Can we be more efficient? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. We can do much more to be efficient. And what do I mean by efficiency? Efficiency means reduce our operational cost to the lowest possible number to make sure that all our resources that come to the UN go to those who need it most. I don't think those criticisms that you are mentioning are unfounded. Otherwise, the Secretary General will not be pushing for an efficiency drive. And I think there is a realization now with the funding crunch that we need to do much better than we have been doing on our operational costs. I'll give you an example. Currently in Pakistan, the UN, we don't have a UN building. Yeah. So we sit in different parts. And this is historical reason, so it's not a criticism per se, but it's a historical reason. But that's very costly.
Yeah.
So each agency then will have its own security. Well, if we lived in one building, then we won't have all the security arrangements, separate arrangements. We'll cut a lot of costs. So, but let me just tell you, one of the things we're committed to doing now in Pakistan is to build one UN house. And the idea then is to get all the agencies there, that we reduce the operational cost. Then we take the money to where it needs to go, all the service. We've also kickstarted, I don't want to bore your listeners or viewers, what's called a common back office. Currently, we don't have that. Essentially, it means each agency has its own protocol, its own procurement, its own administration. And we have 23 agencies here. It's not efficient. The Secretary General's plan is to make sure that we have one procurement, one administration, one that reduces our costs. But the efficiency is something that I think is a fair criticism. Are we efficient? Can we be more efficient? 100%. And it's something that I, as the resident coordinator, is committed to make sure it happens. Interview me, inshallah, in 2-3 years. I'll be able to tell you what we have said.
We'll just write it down and make sure that we follow you up. And I'm sure, like, when it comes to efficiency, there must be a lot of efforts going on to make sure that those funds are utilized to its best. But when these programs are designed, is the local communities, are they also part of the process when these programs are designed?
Absolutely. So first, let me, for your viewers and listeners, important to understand, the UN is here because the government of Pakistan asked us to be here.
Right.
We won't be here otherwise, because we're an intergovernmental organization. We're not an NGO. So many people always confuse the UN. We're not a non-governmental. Our members are the government, including Pakistan. So once we come here, we have what they call a cooperation framework, an agreement with the Pakistani government at the federal level on what are the priority areas that they want, the government wants us to help them. And then we sign at that cooperation framework. And it's normally a 5-year cooperation framework. And then the UN works across the agencies to advance those outcome areas. Basic services, social protection, supporting BISP, for example. Work around, I mentioned before, issues related to labor, decent work. ILO colleagues work on this. How do you labor rights? How do you get conventions that Pakistan needs to sign that they haven't signed on labor rights? And so across the board, so we have like 5 areas: gender equality and women's empowerment. There are 5 areas. Within those 5 areas, then the government, through the EAD, which is our home ministry overall, keeps tab on what we're doing, how much resources do we need for them, how much are we bringing in. And let me tell you one thing most people don't know. One of the largest funders of UN activities in Pakistan is the Pakistan government.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the largest.
Right.
So resources from the government also comes because we have technical capacities the government wants to use to help them implement their own program. So this is how it works. Then that is on the development side. But I'm also the humanitarian coordinator.
Yeah.
Humanitarian is very different approach. Humanitarian is very much need-based. It's not a development program. It's life-saving. I'll give you a class example. We had the terrible conflict in Koram and KPK, religious tension. A lot of people couldn't farm, a lot of people couldn't get access. The UN sent lorries of supplies to those communities. And the goods and services that are in there are based on what the communities think they need urgently.
Right.
So it's different from this long-term development work, which is most of our work here. Government agreed plan, then we take it to the provinces, sit down with the provincial governments, and then we prioritize. Humanitarian response, needs-based, floods come, problems come, and it's more life-saving.
Usually, how do you balance between some immediate crises like floods or when we had the pandemic compared to the long-term goals, so like SDGs? So when it comes to the allocation of funds, is like, do you have some sort of like plans on those ends as well?
So for humanitarian response, we have what's called contingency plan, because the Pakistan's humanitarian needs are climate induced.
Yeah.
And very unpredictable, right? We don't know how this year's monsoon will impact. And we only intervene when there's a specific threshold. So we agreed with NDMA and the PDMAs in the provincial level. What are the level of crisis do you have to reach for the government to ask for help? Because government normally responds themselves, right? Most of the time. PDMAs, provincial government, others, they respond. But like 2022 floods, it becomes so big for the government to do it alone, and they ask for international help. And that is when the UN comes in. But even today, we just plan. We have what's called contingency plans. For a situation get out of hand like 2022, then can we come in? And when we come in, the UN provides nearly everything that the government asks us or to provide.
Right.
Supplies. Number one is financing. In the 2022 floods, we brought $800 million to respond, to save people's lives. So this is the way you do it. But on the development side, it's we have a budget of $4.6 billion over 5 years. And then we plan around that budget, how much resources we can mobilize, and then those programs are implemented across the country. And it's more of a development. It takes time, and but it's important that it's government led. I always tell people there's nothing called development without government. It has never happened. It will not happen. So we have to work with government very closely at the provincial level and at the federal level.
Because also, like, mostly it is also seen that when the development programs that are UN funded, they come with a lifespan, right? So usually 4 to 5 years. And a lot of times there's a perception when those programs end, the work also stops in a way. So is there like any method in place to make sure that, that the work that has been delivered, that knowledge that is there, it doesn't get lost, and ultimately the government takes ownership of the work? So how do you make sure that this continuation goes on?
It's a very basic sustainability issue, and programs who don't do that have already failed from the start. You'll be spending a lot of money, a lot of resources, you create a lot of expectations, you build a lot of white elephant projects that cannot be sustained. So this is why I keep saying government is important, because development is not only a project and resource.
Yeah.
It's about convincing, especially Pakistanis themselves, convincing their leaders, or civil society convincing whoever they need to convince, to do certain sustainable engagements.
Right.
And those are the most critical part. And most of the time is around, when I always tell this story, I joined development because of the work of Mahbubul Haq.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some Pakistanis know, but I know young Pakistanis don't know a lot about him. They should know him because he was an incredible thinker. Because he's the individual, together with Amartya Sen, who came up with the idea that you don't invest in things before investing in people.
Yeah.
It was a completely counter to the GDP concept of development. The idea that if we only grow the economy, so somebody tells this joke. If you go to this is how GDP works. So if you go to a coffee shop and Bill Gates walks in, according to GDP, everybody is a millionaire, right? But it's only one guy who has all the money. But the calculation-wise, everybody is a millionaire.
Yeah.
This is why GDP it doesn't capture the reality of individuals, because it captures the totality.
Yeah.
So one guy could have all the money, and then the country's economic growth is a miracle, which makes. So the entire concept of human development is, no, you invest in people, you create capabilities. And if you invest in people and you create capabilities, that is sustainable, right? You were educated, you were given the capabilities through your education and your exposure, then you don't need anybody. You start your own business, you run your own, and that is what development is about. For me, development is about capabilities. And if we don't think about capabilities, and this is why education, this is why I tell Pakistanis the original sin of underdevelopment is not having children out of school. And this 26 million children out of school, we should focus on that like laser, because that is the wound that will deny the country's ability to reach its potential.
To bring about a social change, you do need to put time and resources into it. But I see that some of the UN funded projects have recently, I've seen social change projects for like 12 months or so. So is there like any particular impediments into implementing it for longer period, or is it just that the government and UN does not see the utility of such programs for a long time?
I agree with you. Something should be long, predictable, but the financing don't allow it fast, because those who give you money have their own time frame. You work for the EU, you one of the biggest funders of the UN work here. They have a very tight framework in their own structures. Not just speaking on the EU, but in most the development partners have their own structures. The second part is that government in democracies, a very interesting way, is democracies, you have an election coming. Long term is not, it's like, I need to win the next election, my friend. You need to show results,
Yes.
and the politicians are under serious pressure. So long-termism doesn't lend itself to the political structures, because you have to win an election, so that's why you see many politicians want to build bridges, and build roads, because they can show.
Absolutely.
But if you say, I have invested in schools and the results will be a generational result, you're probably going to lose an election, my friend. This is the challenge. And I think it takes certain level of leadership to see the need for long-term. So let's just say there are many roadblocks against long-term investments, but I agree with you, is very necessary for transformational results.
So it's interesting that you also see this as a problem of, politicians under pressure of, showing results in 5 years' time, whereas reforms process, it takes a lot of time, especially like, for example, if you need to bring, you talked about like 26 million children out of school. So if you want to get them to schools, if you want to bring about any reforms, you would have multiple challenges. So for example, if we just talk about the education, you may need to train the teachers, you may need to have the basic facilities in the schools. So those things cannot be done in a short period of time. So there is this then paradox as well, because like we cannot get those reforms done efficiently because the system would not allow it. So how do you see then the governance system overall? Do you think that there is a need to make a better governance system which allows to have these reforms take place?
So first, this is not unique to Pakistan. I've worked in 7 countries and in many democracies and elections, even in rich countries.
Yeah.
Long-termism does not lend to re-election, right? So you need to show results. To one extent, it's not a bad thing that the public wants to see result. This individual promised, do I have water?
Yeah.
Do I have, do we have roads. So it's very much understandable from public demands and pressure for politicians to deliver in a short term. But, and let me just say, this is also another challenge of, and this is not speaking as the UN, I've worked in many countries where you have multi-party democracies in poor societies where the interest for, there isn't interest, there is no competition. I will vote for the party that cuts my tax or the party. It's more of like, is this guy from my tribe? Is this guy my religion? Or is this guy from, so because that's the way societies organize themselves in a non-capitalistic developed.
Right.
In a capitalistic societies of developed nation, people organize themselves on wealth class, right? They don't care how you look like as far as you, if I'm a billionaire, I only care the friends of the billionaires who's going to cut my tax. So it's a different social organization. So it's not unique. It's unique to many developing countries. Going back to your question, I think it demands certain level of leadership to see both.
Yeah.
Ability to show basic results, healthcare, education, other things for society to see changes that they need, but also to articulate, and this has to be commonly shared. It can't be one part, for example, long-term solution for children out of school, or the 20 million Pakistani stunted kids. That should not be a political issue. It should be something that all the political class agrees, and it doesn't matter who's in power.
Yeah,
there's a continuity around addressing those long-term challenges. So, and I think this is where internal political settlement is needed for everybody to agree. This is important. It's long term. It's not something that is going to be overnight, but it's not a party political issue. We all think this is fun. I'm telling you, every Pakistani I meet, and this country has incredible people across. They're the ones who point out to me this is a risk to this country having 26 million children out of school. So if you achieve that, then it doesn't matter who's in power. This issue will be addressed by whoever comes in, because I tell people, having this number of children in school, think about it. It's not only, there's one way of looking at it. Say, okay, it's a bad thing not having children in school. Will have high level of literacy when they become young people. But there's also opportunity loss.
Yeah.
This child could have been the next Mahbubul Haq, but born in the wrong village or wrong part of Pakistan, could be a genius that can never realize their potential because they were not given an opportunity. So how many geniuses are we losing by not giving them opportunity? There's that part. But there's also a national security threat. I worked in northern Nigeria where we had the Boko Haram insurgency. I was there for 4 years and a half. And I tell you, all these people who were committing hideous crime, going to mosques, blowing themselves up in northern Nigeria, killing a lot of innocent people. They were from the same town, same village. And guess what was the most common thing among all of them? Illiterate, never went to school, have nothing to do with, and then when you ask them, why are you killing your own people? Why are you attacking your own country? And the question there is, what has the country done for me? So it's also a national security issue. So this is, you have to see this from a opportunity loss, national security danger, and just having high level of productivity. Imagine if tomorrow your company takes off, you become a huge company. Where is your labor source if you have a lot of people out of school? So this is a very important issue, and I think Pakistani politicians and at least Pakistani intelligentsia realizes this. But the question is where to start, how to do it, and where would the resources come from? But the Prime Minister declared an education emergency, which was very much welcome.
In this case that you particularly mentioned about maintaining peace and security, that is also connected to making sure that our masses, the children, who are out of school, are educated enough and they have a brighter future. So talking about the peace and security, how does UN ensures that the conflicts are resolved amicably?
So globally, I mentioned one of the big pillars of the UN Charter is peace and security, and this is mainly led by the Security Council. And Pakistan now has the responsibility to be the president. So Pakistan now decides or gathers the member states, the 15 member states of the Security Council. There are 15 members, and you have 5 permanent, and then the others rotate to deal with global security and challenges. So they bring agendas to be discussed or call meetings and find solutions. So this is a key pillar of the work of the UN. And is normally led by member states. So, for example, I, as a resident coordinator, is not involved in peace and security issues in Pakistan.
Right.
I'm here to do mainly focused on the SDGs and the humanitarian work. Peace and security from the UN framework is dealt by the member states through the Security Council. But I think your question leads to a question that I get from many Pakistanis is why are we not doing enough in all these global challenges that the world is facing, be it the Gaza conflict and the hideous situation in Gaza, unbearable, and the Secretary General has made a lot of proclamation around that, but also the recent Iran-Israel situation, and so many people are sometimes down about this, and they keep asking me, well, why is the UN not doing enough? And my answer is, look, the UN is as effective as its member states, right? So the Security Council deals with these issues. The Security Council do not agree, or one of the permanent 5 vetoes something, is very difficult for that structure to operate. But I've also said something. I had met with some interesting, very amazing journalists here, and I told him another perspective. If you think about the nearly 190 countries in the world, how many countries are invading another one? And the answer is very, very little. Right? Even today, when we are a bit down about international structures and international law and international system, vast majority of the member states are adhering to the charter. Right? Vast majority of them don't invade their neighbors. Vast majority do not break international law. So I always say, don't throw the baby with the bathwater, because most people are following the law. So sometimes we also have to remember that, like, you look at entire Latin America, who's invaded who? Nobody. They're all following international law. You go to Africa with 54 countries, majority of them are not doing anything to break international law. So these pockets are very visible. We live in a very big change, interconnected world. People see the suffering of the people in Gaza, the people in Ukraine, and so these things are very visible and can be very traumatizing. But if you put it in perspective, most of the world adheres to the charter. Most of the world don't break international law. Most countries work to find solutions if they have border contests, and the UN system provides that platform of coexistence and finding solutions.
Right. And so in recent times, there has been a surge of all these wars because, like, there is this Arab conflict going on. India, Pakistan almost came to a war as well. And Donald Trump has been very vocal about striking a peace deal between countries using trade as a tool. So do you think that this is something which is sustainable, and how do you see it overall?
Big countries, especially permanent 5, UN Security Council permanent 5, have always played an important role in peace building. You know, the role that Russia has played in Azerbaijan and Armenia before, the role of the United States in the Dayton peace process between the Balkan countries. If you look at just many examples of member states playing direct role, the role Turkey has played in many peace building in Somalia recently, or between Somalia and Ethiopia. So these things have always existed. The Security Council, I think, because they are members of the Security Council, especially the permanent 5. So that is not a contradiction to the system per se. It's merely going out, and then what you normally see is that they'll come back to the Security Council for a resolution to sign up to that agreement they have facilitated, and as that has happened many times. So that in itself is not a bad thing. It also shows the concept of multilateralism, because two countries at Lord Hay, another country comes in, that is a multilateral outside those two countries, and find solutions. So that in itself is not a bad thing. But all these things always have to go back to Security Council, you see, for resolution or something to support, or to, because the Security Council is the only platform that brings the entire world. There are 15 members, but it brings the entire world, supported by the members who's representing their region. It's important to understand the 15 members. 5 are permanent. The others represent different regional blocks.
Right.
So the Africa has, I think, 2 or 3. This region has others. So each region, Asia, has their own. They elect their own representative on those non-permanent members. So I don't see a big contradiction. I think some member states are louder than normal, but these things have happened. I mean, I gave you, even you look at the agreement between Anwar Sadat, Egypt, and Israel, that was brokered by, I think, President Jimmy Carter. So there's a lot of examples of member states helping find solutions.
When we talk about climate change, for example, that's also one of the things that is going to pose a bigger threat to us compared to like many other things that are going on, and it's going to only get worse with the passage of time if we don't act now. So I learned about the concept of a wet bulb effect, where when there is 100% humidity and the temperature rises to a certain point, it becomes impossible for humans to survive in that environment for a long time. I think max we can survive is like for 6-7 hours. So which means that a lot of areas will become uninhabitable for in the near future, especially this strip of Persian Gulf, Northeast India, and Pakistan, especially the area of Sindh. And there are many other coastal areas as well that will become most likely uninhabitable. So that poses that challenge of probably migration as well. And so when we talk about these international borders and national sovereignty, but there would be this rising need or this challenge of migration at a large scale. How would we be able to address this challenge in near future?
I'm glad you mentioned. I just came back from our retreat with the humanitarian coordinators in Istanbul with our Undersecretary General for OCHA. And one of the most biggest threat, not only to development, but also the biggest generator of humanitarian needs in the future, will be climate change. I think that we see it already in Pakistan, but also climate refugees will become a very, if we continue, and I think we're regressing globally on commitments to reduce emissions, especially for countries that are polluted, continues to pollute, that have created these challenges. So what is it that we can do? There's a few things. One, I think we have to accelerate on adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
How do we live in a much more unpredictable climate patterns? And how do we protect our communities, our vulnerable groups? And how do we protect our investments? I mean, think about Pakistan. Pakistan is in the front line of this because, one, I don't know if you looked at your recent budget. I think 46% of the budget is going to debt repayments, something around those lines. And the 2022 floods, you took a lot of loans to rebuild your infrastructure and other things that you've lost on something you did not create. So you have been trapped into debt to respond to climate change and borrowing to reconstruct from the disaster 2022 from something that Pakistan had very little to do in causing it. It's just the level of the injustice around this issue is mind-blowing and to be frank, very painful. Because you watch a country like this, you say, what has Pakistan contributed to their mission? Negligible. And then your people are being washed away. Your development is being washed away. You see the unpredictable things that is happening in Islamabad. Hells that you've never seen before. Out of nowhere, it becomes night. So the climate change is I know there are those who still contest it, but this issue is settled because I keep telling people who challenge climate change, go visit those who have been washed away, their houses, they blossom, and tell them there's no climate change. So the debate is settled, but we'll have contestations. But how does Pakistan respond? I think embedding climate adaptation into all your development programs and agenda will be the way to go, because this issue is not going. It's going to get worse, unfortunately. We hope that the emission targets that were agreed in Paris will be kept. Now we're seeing a lot of regression because of the COVID, and the countries are thinking now, no, I'm not going to commit to zero emissions. And countries that are very poor are saying, why should I do zero emission when I haven't polluted? But there hope. Let me give you some good potential on the emission side. You see a lot of progress on renewable energy. I was so pleasantly surprised that Pakistan is the largest importer of solar panels in the world than last year.
So, but I think like that also poses new challenges then.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But in terms of renewable, imagine with all the sun you have, if this country's energy can be sustained in a clean manner, then there's that part. There's huge technological progress on solar batteries in China. You see, China overnight has moved to EV cars that we've never seen that level of progress. So globally, there is a progress that's going on. Maybe technology and innovation will help us solve the emission part. Clean energy will become part of our daily life. But the other part is the damage has been done to an extent.
Yeah.
What do we do with those vulnerable groups? And I think issues around adaptation, climate proofing of our development work will be the way to go.
Right. And talking about technological advancements, when you see this rise of AI, and I was like reading one of the projections that by 2030, 800 billion people are going to lose their jobs to automation and AI. So that is probably going to create another divide.
Yeah.
So is UN as an organization doing something about regulating AI to some extent, or addressing the potential threat of job loss?
Good point. On AI, the Secretary General called a conference with President Macron in Paris, I think, around global governance of AI. Some member states obviously were not too into that, but I think there's no way around it. But also, we've done this before on aviation, a global agreement on how we manage the sea. So this will require some level of a global agreement. The Secretary General believes strongly in this. If you look at the Pact of the Future, was an agreement that was agreed by every member state through a consensus in the last General Assembly in the UN, and they issued digital compact. It's called a digital compact, which involves some level of governance will be important. Otherwise, imagine, which we already seen AI speeches where tomorrow, I mean, who knows what is true or what is not true? So if we don't govern those things, I think it will make our lives much more difficult. But if you see from the other side, those who don't want that governance fear that too much regulation will stifle technological progress. I think there's a balance, and I think Secretary General's plans are to meet the balance without stifling progress in terms of AI, but at the same time creating some railguards against disinformation, misuse of AI that will harm human beings and the environment. We will see now targeting of using AI to decide on targeting in a war. I mean, it's quite scary if you think about where this tool can go if it's not managed well.
And so, like we were talking about the population as well, UN has been working in population control.
Yeah.
There is also population collapse in some countries. There is an aging population problem in a lot of them. So is population collapse also one of the things that is being considered or talked about in the programs that you're planning?
So for the UN, and I think I mentioned to you, the issue here is not population control. And I think this creates, this is the challenge in terms of explaining this thing, is about giving people the option to manage their family or family planning, an option. So the debate here as an option is not whether you should use that option or not. Yeah. So the idea is that if a woman wants to control how many kids she has, then she should have, through the reproductive health, the opportunity to do that. So if she decides after 2 kids or after 4 kids, I'm fine, I don't want to have more kids, then she should have access to the tools she needs through her healthcare providers, public health, to do that. So many countries, that option doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Now, that does not mean that we are pushing, at least through our UNFPA, to tell people how many children you should have.
Yeah.
That is too intrusive, and that's not our business. If somebody wants to have 10 kids and they can afford to look after them and send them to school and raise amazing next generation Pakistanis, good luck. And that's your choice as an individual. But the idea is that if somebody, rich people, let me put it this way: if you're a wealthy Pakistani,
Yeah.
You can control how many kids you have, and you have access if you don't want to have too many kids. The issue is the vulnerable people, poor families in rural Pakistan who don't have that option. And that is what reproductive health does, is to give them an option to say, if me and you, couples, decide we want to have 10 kids and we don't want to have 11 anymore, they should have a choice not to have the 11. So sometimes this is misconstrued as we are controlling, the plan is to control the population or to control the ummah. It's really about options, and it's a health option, it's an individual choice that families have to make. And I think that now going back, so luckily Pakistan doesn't have a population problem in relation to all what the challenge that Europe has, where there's no, people are not growing, there's reproductive challenges. So this, for me, will think in a normal world, you will be thinking about what do you call it, pathway for migration. So in a normal world, if people were much more into the cooperation mindset, you will be thinking places where they don't have enough people should give access to places that have a lot of people who may want to go there, and this is what we call it, the pathway for migration pathways.
Yeah.
So if migration pathway doesn't exist in these countries where the population is collapsing, they don't want anybody coming in while their population is dying, that's a crisis as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's no option for those old people to have kids. They're not going to have kids. So so in some countries that are doing incentives, I know Hungary recently, some of them where they give incentives, or Japan, they give people an incentive to have more kids. That can work. But I was in Japan a few weeks ago, and I met a very young Japanese couple, and I was asking them why, how on the population issue. And the most interesting thing they told me is not only about incentives. It's also about the nature of work. People work for very, very long hours. To me, there's many other social issues related to whether couples have kids or where people get married in the first place. So there's a lot of complex things. But this trend is normal in the history of humanity, in the sense that the richer the country is, the less the population, because people have less kids. The poorer society is, the more kids there are. It's always been like that everywhere.
Which is counterintuitive as well, because naturally it feels like if you have more money, you may want to go for a larger family, which is actually not the case.
Because the richer you are, you send your children to private schools in those countries. Each of them is a speaking mortgage, I call it. It's like you have to. It's extremely. Then you realize, a child is an extreme. Not only financial terms, the relationship that you have with your child is very different.
Absolutely.
When you're growing in rural, I grew up in a rural household in the Kenyan coast. You just roam around as a child. The entire village is your nannies. In the big cities, you can't do that. You have to. It's a lot of cost.
Parenting then becomes a lot of
exactly.
Becomes very challenging as well. Okay, so before we conclude, I want you to tell me the best advice you have ever received.
Best advice. That's anything. What is the best advice I've ever received? I think it's got to do with failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I've had this several times, but the one I remember a specific impact, the discussion I've had, where one was a quote and one was somebody not connected to that quote reinforcing. The one quote was, I don't know who was associated with, but the quote goes and says, success is moving from one failure to the next without losing enthusiasm. So success is series of failures, but it's not the failure, it's how you respond to the failure that determines success. So enthusiasm, so essentially you maintain your enthusiasm, you start a new business, it didn't work out. You had a great idea with a fantastic restaurant, it didn't work out. The only thing that is going to stop you from achieving your end result, if you was a successful businessman, a political leader, is giving up.
Yeah.
Giving up is the only threat that faces, that is between you and the world and the vision you have for yourself. So losing enthusiasm is the thing that you have to guard against. So I'll tell people, I'm the head of the UN here. Before I joined the UN, I applied 50 times. Nobody responded to me. 51st time is when I got an interview. The rest is history.
Wow.
Constantly waking up every morning, investing in your ambition, and realizing your full potential means never giving up. So that is my only advice I've gotten. And every time, even in my day-to-day work, whenever something doesn't work, things are not moving, I only know that they will not move if I give up on them. So it's constantly going back, finding another way of doing the same thing. And that will be my advice for your listeners.
Well, that's great.
Enthusiasm in failure.
That's great. I mean, learning from every failure and then being persistent to keep following whatever you're doing.
Exactly. And I can tell you, the laws of probability is this: if you keep failing and you never give up, you will succeed.
Yeah.
It's just not giving up. It's the risk you have to guard against, because it's so easy to give up. It's so easy to conclude that something big, there's a conspiracy against you. There may be conspiracy against you, but imagine how sweet it is when you overcome it.
Yeah.
So it's this constantly not giving up on your ambition and not listening to anybody that whatever you do is not doable. And I think that is the trick to success.
And any book that you would recommend us to read? Any book that changed the way you think?
There's several books, but one small book, because I know people have the attention span of sitting down for a book is very difficult. But there's a book called Exterminate All the Brutes by Sven Lindqvist. It was a short book, actually. I will ask people if they have access to the show. The Exterminate All the Brutes. It's a very interesting book. He's a Swedish writer traveling through Algeria. I won't tell you the rest, but it's good to that's one book that has stayed with me for a very, very long time in terms of seeing things differently.
Perfect. Mohamed Yahya, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and thank you to you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.